You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Hi, my name's Emilia. I play cricket for Oxford and Italy, and you're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast.
Emilia, I thought we'd talk about the growth and development of women's cricket within Italy in terms of getting women's cricket into local communities, clubs, schools, and grassroots, etc. Because this is one of the challenges that many associate nations have, is how they introduce women's cricket into their communities and promote it. That's easier said than done. Many cricket associations or federations ask themselves these particular questions and sit back in their chair and scratch their head and say, oh, how are we going to do all this? So how do the Italy Cricket Federation try to introduce cricket into the community more broadly, but also women's cricket, grassroots cricket, establishing local cricket clubs and local clubs for women's sides as well, in terms of getting them into the local communities, competitions, pathways, systems, underage comps, building up towards the national team with the talent pathways. Having facilities, that's a big problem in associate cricket. You don't have access to nets or grounds for people to watch or play cricket and to access in their local areas as well. And making women's cricket accessible for everyone as well. That's a challenge there. And as you mentioned earlier, Emilia, getting women's cricket into schools in their programs and encouraging girls to take up cricket and pursue that if they want to, or just to be active in general, really, and just participate in what is a great game. So a lot of questions that many cricket associations and federations have to ask themselves, and all associate nations are in the same boat because it comes down to funding, money, all those particular issues. But they try and manage the best way they can and try and get through it. So, Emilia, what challenges does the Italy Cricket Federation have in trying to grow and develop women's cricket in the Italian community? And do you ever see women's cricket becoming, one of the number one women's sports in Italy in the near future? Your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Like it's not an easy thing. I think I think real positives have been the national kind of league in Italy has expanded massively, and there's a lot more teams playing this year than there were last year. And I think that with that brings, more involvement of the general community, because obviously it's not just the players, you need the coaches, you need the facilities, you need the managers, you need the scorers, you need the blah, blah, blah. And I think cricket's quite a complicated game in that respect, isn't it? Like football, you can kind of get away with playing it a bit anywhere. But cricket, you need such specific resource, and it's not cheap. So it's not easy. And I think one of the barriers that's happening is that, you could go into a school and run, like an 8-week after school cricket thing, or go into PE lessons, that sort of stuff that you do in the UK. But then say you get 10 interested girls and then you've got no resource, where do they go from there? And I think that's the kind of next thought process about, actually, can we get some more grounds in? Where are they going to go? Like what can we build in the community that then has the resource to accept all these new players? So I think that's kind of the level that Italy are at the moment. I believe that they're trying to organise more softball type events as well for kids, and that includes obviously girls. And I think they've run some of those, I want to say end of last year. And I think they'll be looking to continue that. And, like quick cricket stuff, the equivalent of kind of Dynamos and All Stars here.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it's building from. It's just going to take time. It's going to take time. It's not easy to expand a sport outside of communities that already know it. But then maybe with, communities, say the Sri Lanka community being well integrated with the Italian community, you become friends and, bring your friends along. And I think it will take generation maybe, but it's a good setup. It's a strong setup. I think it has longevity. So yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I suppose, that's the problem, isn't it? Funding comes to money and resources and volunteers, and many associate countries, the volunteers are doing it as a volunteer, basically, not full time. They have other jobs and other commitments in their life to live, which is the case with many associate nations. And that's something that I've realized when I've spoken to a lot of people in this associate cricket series on the podcast. They always say the same thing. It's going to take time, limited resources, money, funding, and maybe the ICC can do a little bit more than they're doing at the moment to help associate countries when it comes to that. But every country is different, I suppose. Every country has a different situation, really, in the associate world. Some countries are well off, others not so much. I'm not sure what the situation is like in Italy in terms of the books and finances. But, other countries who start from scratch, basically are starting from scratch. They have no base or foundation to build off. So I think it's very important that we need to come together as a cricket community to try and help everyone out when it comes to growing and developing the sport. But you mentioned kids are interested. Do you do coaching clinics? Do the national teams go out and coach in local communities or schools? Just tell us about some of those coaching clinics that you do as a national side.
So I think it's just starting, and I think part of that is building the confidence of the team to that they know more than they think they know. And, when you're coaching kids, partly it's crowd control, isn't it? And partly it's getting them to enjoy the game. And so I think they've just done like a coaching course for some of our team. So, just again, it's the start of this. So there's not a huge amount of outreach, I would say, into the local communities, because I think the first thing is building the foundations of getting the players to the point where they can do that. But I think there's our captain lives up in the north of Italy, so she'll be doing the kind of community-based work there. I don't know if that's started yet already, but it's definitely, they're starting with the coaching qualifications and, doing bits within our squad with the newer members of the team, and I think it will build from there. I don't necessarily think it would be fair to just send everyone off into schools and just expect that to succeed, because you just don't have the same foundations as you do like in the UK, where someone's maybe grown up having the coaching, they've grown up in a club setup, everything's already set up for them, kids know what cricket is, schools know what cricket is, you just walk in and you do a session. Like, it's easy here. I mean, easy relatively. In Italy, there's much more barriers to walking into a classroom and being like, let's play quick cricket, because they just have no idea. And so I think you need to be at a point where then there needs to be more work done before you can just send people out.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
It's all about that education and coaching, not only for the kids, but also for the people doing these coaching clinics. You need to teach them. They need to have accreditation to be a coach, which can often be hard, trying to obtain that, running courses that the ICC run. And, you have to go through all that process as well. So it is a difficult sort of system to navigate, but eventually you make it towards the other end, and the rewards speak for themselves, and, the kids enjoying themselves and having fun, and, realizing, we have a national team. Wow, I didn't know that. Go and support the teams, and that's how it goes. And then they tell their friends, and then their friends tell them, and so on. So that's important to try and get it into the schools and make it mainstream in associate countries, is that domino effect of their friend, these kids telling their friends and their family, their brothers and sisters or whatever, that, cricket's a great sport. You should try it. See what it can do for you in terms of meeting new people and just having fun and being active, I suppose, which is fantastic. So good to hear that it's very promising there in terms of the growth and development side when it comes to cricket in general, but also women's cricket, and encouraging to hear that girls are interested as well. Very optimistic about the future of the game and its development and growth. Do you think more can be done at the moment in terms to improve that, or you think it's just where it is at the moment, it's just right, and then we can think of other things to do in the future possibly?
I think it's in a good place. I think there could be more done externally. Like I think the ICC have a bit more they could be doing. I know you mentioned other people have said the same, but like, I don't know if you know what happened with the France women's team.
Yes, I did hear that.
And I just think because the ICC put things in place that you get more funding if you have a women's team. You need to have a women's team for the men's team to be able to do certain things, which is, I understand. I agree with that, because it promotes people, it kind of forces people into having a women's team, which then, will go on and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going to mandate things like that, then the ICC then need to help when things like this happen. And I think they just haven't been very helpful. And I think they have a responsibility to help. And, it's the ICC, like they need to help associate nations. You can't just brush them off because it's, just France. And I think, I really feel for the French women's team. So in regards to things like that, more needs to be done.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more with that. The ICC, a governing body, they're not everyone's flavor of the month at the moment from every aspect of the world game at the moment. But going back to the growth and development, really encouraging signs there. And hopefully that continues in Italy going forward in terms of promoting the sport in general, but also women's cricket. So very good to see the numbers are promising and optimistic for the future. So that's fantastic. Emilia, your little rant about the ICC has led us on to our next topic, which we'll talk about with the ICC in terms of their involvement with women's cricket. But I thought we'd talk about women's associate cricket and women's cricket in general. And it's come on leaps and bounds over the years, hasn't it, women's cricket? Its coverage is better on TV, and people are seeing it more now compared to when you were growing up. There was less exposure. Many young girls are taking up the sport, which is fantastic to see. And many people are watching women's cricket and are invested into it as well. There's an audience there, which is fantastic. The T20 Women's World Cup final in 2020, when Australia played India at the MCG, had 86,174 people watch the final. So those people are invested in women's cricket, which is fantastic to see that. And it broke all sorts of records at the time. And we are seeing very talented and skilled women cricketers in the women's game today. And also T20 leagues, like the Women's Big Bash, the Women's Premier League, the Women's 100 in your part of the woods there in England is benefiting the women's game. It's actually done wonders for the women's game over there, the Women's 100. And giving opportunities to female players who are a part of full member countries, but also associate countries, to play in these leagues, travel the world, and showcase their skills on a global stage, which I think is fantastic. And you can also add Fair Break into that list as well, which, for those who don't know what Fair Break is, it's a T20 franchise tournament that has 90 or so female players from over the world, including some of the best players in the women's game that play in a tournament every year to promote associate cricket and also give them an opportunity to interact with players from full member countries as well in the women's game, which is fantastic to see that. And we've interviewed a couple of people who are part of that tournament, Mariko Hill from Hong Kong and Tina Goff from Germany. They've been involved in those tournaments. And also Roberta Moretti-Avery as well. And she's been at the forefront when it comes to Fair Break as well. So, but Amelia, women's cricket still has a long way to go. You would agree with that. And many barriers face the women's game today. The stigma towards women's cricket still prevalent amongst cricketing fans trying to grow and develop women's cricket, as we mentioned, in associate countries just before. Investing in women's cricket, full stop. Female associate players are walking away from the game because they don't have any security. They don't have contracts. They're not getting paid. And you've mentioned that earlier in our chat today, etc. So, Emilia, since you started playing cricket, what have been the big changes in women's cricket from when you started until now? And what are the areas that need to be improved in women's cricket going forward from your perspective?
So definitely media coverage has massively improved. Bigger tournaments, like the 100 where you have the double headers and, that gives more exposure to women's cricket. I think just like better media coverage and more professional media coverage, good standard of commentary, stuff like that, which I think makes the whole game as a whole more professional, because even if the skill level is the same as the men's, if you've got poor media coverage, not very good commentary, people aren't going to enjoy watching it, are they? So so the things around the game have to be professional as well. I think the pathways into professional women's cricket are much more established. They're much more transparent. They're easier. Not easier to be a part of. I don't mean that. I mean they're easier to know about. They're easy. It's more. You go through your youth pathway, and then you'll trial for your regional team or whatever. So that's definitely a lot better. And I think the standard of coaching has improved as well. I think at a local level, it would be really helpful if structure was built to include women, like, women's toilets in pavilions would be great. 3 changing rooms so that there's a women's changing room and 2, things like that. At a kind of more local level, support of women, not just as players, so support of female umpires, support of female scorers, that kind of thing. I think the really basic stuff we need to improve on. And then I think probably an appreciation of women's cricket as its own sport, because I think, I play men's cricket, I play women's cricket. They're different games almost. They're just not, I don't think you can compare them fully. It's a different sort of game. It almost has different tactics. It has different ways of playing. And I think people just need to appreciate that a bit more and not just expect it to be men's cricket. It's like, well, no, it's its whole own thing. And it needs to be celebrated for being its own thing and appreciated for that, not just always compared to the highest level of men's cricket. It's just different. But I don't think we're quite there yet. But huge improvements over the last 10, 15 years. And huge improvements, I think, on the safeguarding of women in cricket as well, in terms of what the ECB... still lots of work to do, but definitely heading in the right direction.
Definitely. Yes, absolutely it is. Definitely going in the right direction. And you made a good point there about comparing it to men's cricket. It's a game of cricket at the end of the day. Nothing's changed. There's still a bat and a ball and stumps. Similar aspects between men's and women's cricket. But as you said, it's a different game. It's a different game to men's cricket. And people should expect that and see it in a different coloured lens, so to speak, rather than the lens they're seeing men's cricket played at the moment. There's many different things with women's cricket and men's cricket, but you can see the talent, you can see the skills, and there are some very good cricketers out there, playing the game, who have been playing for a very long time, like the Elise Perrys, like the Nat Sciver-Brunts of the world over there in England. They are pretty talented. They're pretty skilled, and they know what they're doing. And you know, they're winning games for their countries and for their franchises now with these T20 comps popping up around the world. So yeah, I think, you know, cricket's one of those sports where change is not frowned upon kindly. It takes a bit of a while for people to warm to the idea. But women have been playing cricket for years, you know, going way, way back to the game's history. They've been playing since the 1800s or something like that. The first recorded records of females playing some sort of cricket, any form of cricket back in those days. So it's been around for a very long time. It's been a part of the game for a very long time. And I think people just need to, you know, learn more about it, and then they're probably warm to the idea. But obviously everyone's not going to like it or not. You know, that's just their own personal preference. Does that frustrate you a little bit in terms of hearing people comment about women's cricket in a very disrespectful way? Does that bother you, or do you feel like that's, you know, it's their opinion or whatever? I just brush it aside and I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Does that ever frustrate you when you hear those comments from people that don't really rate women's cricket highly?
I mean, yeah, it's not. I mean, you know, why would you bother having a go at women's cricket? I don't know. It just seems like a really like, if you're going to get angry about something, like why would you choose women's cricket? Like, I don't know, get angry about climate change or like systemic racism. I don't know. Like, it doesn't. I'll challenge it if I hear it. And I think, you know, working on like integration of women in like clubs and, you know, fighting for the, you know, the right to play and the right to have equal resource and things like that, I think are more important to me than like listening to some middle-aged man bang on about how women can't play cricket. Like, I don't really have time for it. But I think it is important to challenge it in terms of when you hear it. But I think also you can't have a moan about women's cricket when, if it's not equally funded, you don't have equal opportunity, and there's many more barriers in place. Like, private schools aren't going to be focusing on cricket in the same way that male private schools, you know, focus on cricket, and the amount of money that goes into producing those players. It's like, well, you can't compare them then, can you? Because you haven't put the same amount of resource into, you know, if there was a private women's school that heavily invested in cricket and churned out elite athletes, then maybe we could talk again. But like, it's not happening, so you can't compare them. So it doesn't, like, yeah, it annoys me, but I don't spend huge amounts of time thinking about it.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. You just say, okay, yeah, all right, we'll move on, and I just keep doing what I'm doing and keep, you know, being a role model to young girls who want to take up the sport. People have a right to their opinion. That's their right. It's just one of those things that's going to take time. That stigma, as we keep chipping away at that towards women's cricket. But you know, cricket's meant to be inclusive. You're meant to include everyone, not exclude anyone. It doesn't matter where you come from in terms of your country or race or background. You should feel safe and be welcomed into the game of cricket and be a part of this great game. And we shouldn't exclude everyone. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes when we think about these issues. Cricket's a game for all. It's meant to be a sport enjoyed by everyone around the world, and hopefully that's the case. But there are some good things happening, and there's some progress being made, but there's still a long way to go with women's cricket, but very good signs nonetheless. Now, you talked about the ICC a little bit before. How would you rate them in terms of support, in terms of associate women's cricket, in terms of helping women's teams in the associate world? How would you rate their performance in terms of providing that support from the ICC?
Yeah, I mean, so in the tournaments we played last year, they were really, really good. I think Esther DeLange, I think her name is. She is kind of don't know her official title, but she was kind of the managing director of those two tournaments. And it's helpful that she's female in terms of like she's played as well. So she sort of knows the barriers and things. And she was very keen on promoting like us in commentating as well. So we all got a stint, those who wanted to did a stint in commentating, because she knows she needs to promote women in different positions other than just playing. The tournaments were incredibly well run, well resourced. So I kind of know that the ICC can't ignore European cricket anymore, because I think ECM showed that it's getting quite serious. It feels like they're maybe a little reluctant, but I don't know if that's just my perception of it. I think, because they're in charge of all cricket in a way.
Yeah.
They obviously have to prioritize, the bigger teams and things. But I think they could do more, like I say, in protecting the women's teams. Yeah. Like I don't know how much power they have, like over, say, the France Federation and helping their women's team. Like, I don't know if they're able to intervene at all, but I would have expected them to have reached out to the players and kind of said, we've got your back. And I that's really disappointing that they feel like their governing body has just not been helpful.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's fair enough. I agree with that. You need the support from the governing body, that's for sure. And yeah, as I said, they're not the flavour of the month at the moment, the ICC, in terms of how the whole game of cricket is run. International cricket, men's cricket, the international calendar, every aspect of cricket's in a mess. Let's be honest, it is. It's not in a perfect place. So yeah, they can always do more. You have a responsibility as a governing body to learn and to listen and to reflect, but it takes good leadership. I don't think we quite have that at the ICC at the moment with the leadership. You need good, strong leaders to make these tough decisions. And, full member countries need to do more as well when it comes to helping associate cricket out. In terms of the distribution model, funding and all that stuff, you just need to, put the interests of the game first rather than your self-interest, I think. And, we're a cricket community. We need to help everyone out. And that's what the game should be doing. Whereas at the moment, it's not quite doing that. So, yeah, I can understand the frustrations that many people have in the associate world when it comes to that. I've spoken to those people behind the scenes and they're frustrated. They just want what's best for cricket. But they often say that the regional body of the ICC, so ICC Europe or the regions, are more helpful and receptive to any requests or needs. I've heard some great things from the people I've spoken to. They've said, yeah, the regional ICC bodies are pretty helpful in terms of resources and helping us out, which is good. That's encouraging. But the ICC as a governing body in general is not quite delivering to the table. So definitely a lot of work to do there. Do you feel that frustration among female associate players that you've talked to about, women's associate cricket and their particular countries? Do they feel frustrated? Do they feel like they are uncertain about their future in the game?
I think it would depend on the country, and I don't think there's a lot of frustration. I think there's a lot of barriers, but I think that's expected, so it doesn't come with frustration necessarily.
Yeah.
My worry, I suppose, is that as in all kind of semi-voluntary organizations, it relies on key people to keep things going. So like the captain of the Swedish team is like incredible and is driving huge amounts of women's cricket. I don't know if that's sustained. Like I don't know much about their setup, but just as an example, like if you lose your key drivers, then that's when, you know, that's a worry. So I think it's about making it sustainable in Europe. Now, you know, there's been a big drive. It's driven by people often giving huge amounts of their own time, but it's like, how do you then build enough foundation that if they were to take a step back, there'll be enough people to keep driving it forward?
Yeah, definitely. And there are some passionate people behind the scenes who want to promote women's cricket and promote that across the associate world and make it better. Do you think that these female players from the associate nations, do you feel like they are under a little bit of pressure when it comes to performance, because the rankings, and that has a big say of whether a particular country gets funding or not? Do you think that's something that needs to be changed by the ICC going forward?
Do you know what? I haven't spoken to many people about that. I suspect that at the moment, because of the level of experience in cricket, it's not the level of cricket isn't strong enough for there to be pressure, because everyone is, you know, everyone is playing their best, and often there's people in the team that are really inexperienced. And so you can't really have those kinds of expectations because they're just not professional enough as teams. Yeah. I think probably higher up, when you go a bit higher, like the Scottish team, you know, the Netherlands team, I guess to a certain extent the Italian team. But again, because it's so small in its infancy, those aren't the kind of pressures that you're fighting against. Like, yeah. I think that's a problem for further down the line.
Yeah, definitely. But as we've said, you know, women's associate cricket is, you know, moving in the right direction. And it's good to see many of the associate nations have women's teams now, which is fantastic. And wanting to promote women's sport and also women's cricket in those countries, which is fantastic. And I've heard a lot of good stories about the women's teams, you know, coming together and wanting to play and enjoy the game, which is fantastic. That's what you want in general, really, from anyone that plays cricket. You want to have them to have that enjoyment and be a part of something that's making a difference and being role models, really, for kids and young boys and girls who want to take up the sport, which is fantastic. So we're not going to solve the problems overnight, Emilia, by chatting on this podcast today about women's associate cricket or women's cricket in general. But there are some good encouraging signs. There's some good work. There's been good progress. But it will take time. But we're getting there. And hopefully people realize that women's cricket has a place in cricket and has a place in the cricketing world, and also these associate countries. It makes a lot of difference to these players because it changes their lives. You know, they come from very diverse backgrounds, and cricket's a way for them to travel the world, see the world, and doing it out of their own pocket most of the time. But they're just loving what they're doing, and that's playing cricket and representing their countries. So definitely good signs in the women's game when it comes to those areas and aspects, and hopefully that continues hopefully that continues on for the years to come, and hopefully we see that improvement and those barriers getting smashed down, and hopefully that happens in the near future. So thanks for sharing your thoughts about that. Really appreciate that on women's associate cricket. Emilia, we've finally come to the end of our long interview. It's been a marathon. It's like batting for 6 hours in a test match, and you finally come to the last session, last over of the day. We've gone into overtime because the over rates are shocking these days in the game, aren't they? But there's one more topic to talk about, Emilia. Then we're done. Then you can say, yes, I'm done. Finally, we can get this done. And I thought we'd talk about what the future holds for women's cricket in Italy to end on. And it's very hard to predict the future, as we know. The future is very uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. But I thought it's a good way just to predict, look in the crystal ball and see how the future looks like and the outlook. So, Emilia, how do you see women's cricket in Italy women's associate cricket and women's cricket going into the future. So if you had to look into the crystal ball and predict, how do you see the future?
I think short term, there'll be a possible influx of more players that live abroad. There's been a lot more interest by players who live abroad. I think the exposure that it gives you playing in ECN, and I think people want to be part of that and represent their country. And I think now that Italy's playing a good level of cricket, it's been interesting to talk to people who aren't part of the setup, but want to be, now that they see what we're doing. I think that needs to be really carefully managed, because the most important thing is the development of cricket within Italy. So like I said, I think we'll see a slowing down of the trajectory of progression, not progression, but of success, shall I say, which I think is natural. As you get better, it becomes harder, but also to allow focus to be on youth pathways, development of the next generation, strong foundations. Having said that, it's the Olympics coming up. Cricket's part of the Olympics. Who knows? Not sure what the process is, but might be something to look forward to. So I don't know what's going to happen with that and whether Italy will be a part of that by that stage. But it's something to work towards, I think. And, we've made so much progress in the last 2 years that it'll be interesting when the next World Cup qualifiers come around, what stage we'll get to there. So they're kind of big goals. But like I said, development and progression within the country is going to be a key focus.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. It's a steady grind, isn't it? Steady progression, as you said, to get to those particular goals and ambitions in associate cricket when it comes to women's cricket, but also women's cricket more broadly as well, which is where we want to get to at the end of the day. You also mentioned cricket in the Olympics as well. That's a big game changer for associate cricket. More funding for associate cricket as well. And there's a massive upside in that as well. And a lot of the people I've spoken to have said, that's a big game changer for us, getting funding from the sporting governing body in a particular country, the Olympic Committee. So I think that's a really good move to have cricket in the Olympics, even though if those associate countries are not a part of the tournament, it's on TV. People can see that cricket's available in their country, and that's a good benefit as well. So the future is bright. As I said, it's very uncertain, so things can change from now until whenever in the years to come. Yeah. But I think we should be optimistic and very optimistic about the future of women's cricket in Italy, but also women's associate cricket as well, and women's cricket in general. So thanks for that bit of a prediction into the future. Well, Emilia, thank you for joining me today for this Associate Cricket Series episode to discuss all things Italy women's cricket and your cricketing journey. I've had a great time. I've learnt loads. We've had a bit of a laugh, haven't we? I'm sure people listening to this long episode have as well. They've learnt a lot about your journey, where you've come from, how you got to where you are, and your thoughts on women's cricket and learning more about the Italy women's cricket team. And I think a lot of people will learn a lot out of this episode. And that's the whole aim, really, to educate people and just have a good yarn about the game of cricket, isn't it? We're all cricket tragics at heart, and we love having a bit of a chat, as we've done today. Emilia, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they do that on social media, or if they want to ask questions, where can they do that?
Yeah, Instagram's probably best. My account, mbartram01. Easiest place.
Yeah, we will leave links to that in the description of this episode for people to check out Emilia's socials and get in touch and contact and ask her questions about women's cricket in Italy and learn more about the team. So we'll leave a link to that in the description of this episode. Before we go, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. So the podcast is available on Anchor, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you, Emilia, for joining me today to discuss all things Italy women's cricket and your cricketing journey. I hope all of you watching or listening to this Associate Cricket Series episode learned a lot about women's cricket in Italy from Emilia and her cricket journey. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.